Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida podcast. In this show, we talk to leaders in the community, leaders of clubs, and interesting folks who live here in the Villages to get perspectives of what is happening here in the Villages, Florida. We are a listener-supported podcast. There will be shout-outs for supporters in episodes. In Season 6, we will continue making substantial improvements to the podcast.
This is Mike Roth, and listeners, I'm thrilled to share with you this podcast, which is my passion project for you. This podcast brings me joy, brings you knowledge, inspiration, and a lot of things that people need to know about the Villages and the people living here. Be sure to hit the follow button to get the newest episode each week. Creating this podcast is a labor of love, even though it demands more time that I can easily spare. Now, here's where you come in. You can help us keep the podcast alive and thriving. How? By becoming a supporter. The easy way for you to support us is to visit our podcast webpage, openforuminthevillagesflorida.com, and click on the supporter button at the top of the page, or the purple supporter box on the right side of the page. Even a small donation of $3 to $10 a month makes a big difference. And guess what? You can cancel your subscription at any time. No strings attached. Your support means the world to us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep those headphones on. I hope everyone enjoys today's show.
This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. I'm here today with Mark Newhouse. Thanks for joining me, Mark.
We're honored to be here with you.
Mark is a writer and a writer's coach. He is also the past founding president of the Writers League. He was the founder of the Book Expo. What is the Book Expo?
The Book Expo features 100 of our local authors once a year, being able to talk to visitors and sign their books and inspire writers. It'll be at the Eisenhower Recreation Center this year on January 20th. It's a wonderful time for parents to bring their children and for residents to be inspired by our writers. I love it.
So that's open to the public.
It's open to the public, and it's free.
How many writers are going to be there?
This year, we're going to have about 100, and we also have 2 presenters that are going to be wonderful. I don't know who they are yet, but it's amazing to me the variety of books Villages have created. And we also have authors who are not from the Villages who have heard about the expo and love to share their books with people in the Villages. The Eisenhower Recreation Center is an amazingly inspiring recreation center.
It's almost a museum.
It's beautiful. There's nothing like it anywhere else. This is about the 18th year since I started this, and it's just grown, and it's wonderful.
How many people came last year?
About 3,000. You can spend a whole day there because if you have the dream of writing a book, talking to our authors is going to help you. It's going to inspire you. And joining our writing groups is just such a helpful thing.
Again, what was the date of the expo?
It's a Sunday this year.
Okay, good. And what time does it start in the morning?
I think probably around 10 o'clock and goes till about 2 o'clock.
Anyone hearing this podcast can actually go out, meet the authors, buy the books, and signatures in the books.
Signed books make wonderful gifts. It's a great way to promote writing to your children and grandchildren. It's just so easy to mail a book.
Now, does a writer have to be a resident of the Villages?
No, not at all. Most of the writers are from the Villages, but we also have people who come as far as Orlando and the East Coast. It's now a wonderful reputation. It's one of the largest book and author expos anywhere in Florida. I'm very proud of this. It started out as a small project, part of my insanity, and then it just grew and grew. What's nice about it is that I'm no longer running.
That's an old story here in the Villages. The only way you get out of running something is by dying.
That's true. Writers League. I started Writers League years ago, and we had about 30 members. We're up to about 300 members now. And we only had one writing club when I first moved here. And now I believe we're up to about 15 official writing clubs sponsored by the Recreation and Parks Department. So it's grown tremendously.
Financially successful from writing?
That's a great question. When you start writing books, especially in retirement, I'm not sure that financial gain is your most important objective. When I see a grandparent finishing their book and saying to me, now I have so many children, grandchildren, I think that's really the main objective. And when one does become financially viable, I think that's a plus. I have made money on my books. I know other authors who have also made money on their books, but I don't think that's the main motivation. When I speak to potential writers, I tell them they may not make money, but the idea that they're creating a legacy, their children and grandchildren, is something unmatchable.
That legacy idea is a fantastic idea. I suggest to people that they create a podcast series for their grandchildren and great-grandchildren who are even conceived yet.
Mike, you're absolutely right. I never thought that my retirement would be like this. I was a classroom teacher on Long Island. I was honored by a number of awards for my creativity and dedication. When I retired, I was looking forward to playing golf, sitting by the pool, having dinners with my wonderful wife, and I got wrapped up in this cyclone of wonderful activities in the villages. And one of the things that I never thought I would do was create a podcast. The podcast I created began as a play that I wrote for my underachieving sixth grade students to perform at the senior center. It was kind of Perry Mason, goes around the Jack and the Beanstalk story. It was called The Case of the Jack and the Beanstalk. And it was a mock trial. I took that idea, and when I retired, I wrote a book called Welcome to Monstrovia. As I said, I never thought that it would become a podcast, but that's what actually happened. We've created a series of podcasts, which you can listen to for free.
How do they listen to it for free?
You can listen to it on Amazon, Spotify, I believe, has it, and Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and Go Kid Go. They all are featuring it. And I'm amazed because I was told yesterday that we've had 96,000 downloads in its first year.
That's a very big number.
I think it's amazing. And they've actually started monetizing it, which totally amazes me. But what I really love about it is that the main character I was able to name after my granddaughter.
And what did you call her?
Her name is Carrie. She is 11 years old now. But in my podcast, she's 10 years old. And her uncle, who is the famous lawyer for monsters and fictional characters in Monstrovia, has been kidnapped in a nefarious plot that extends 10 episodes. And she is left to defend monsters accused of all kinds of crazy crimes. And I just love this series because when I was a little boy, I was inspired by Perry Mason. And I wanted to be a lawyer because of Perry Mason. And that gave me a goal, which kept me on the right side of the law when many of my friends who didn't have goals ended up getting into trouble and some dying because of drugs. I think it's so important for kids to have goals. When I proposed my podcast series, I made very clear that not only was it supposed to be fast-moving and exciting, but I also wanted it to be educational and provide the inspiration so children today would have goals. I call it a Perry Mason, the Perry Kids Today.
That's great. You've written several other books. Why don't you tell our listeners about your favorite book that you've written?
I love all my books, but my absolute favorite was to leave a legacy for my grandchildren. I actually discovered that we have a secret in my family that I didn't really know about, that I was born 2 years and 1 day after my mother was freed from Auschwitz. I was actually born in a displaced persons camp in Germany. And I knew my parents were Holocaust survivors, but I knew almost nothing about their past and how they survived. And one of the things that really was of concern to me, that they had lived in a place called Lodge, which is actually pronounced Vud, and it was a ghetto. But most of my life, I thought it was like Anatevka in Fiddler on the Roof. After my mother passed away, I learned that she had given me a book, the Chronicle of the Lodge Ghetto. This book was written in secret in the same building where the Nazi ghetto administrators had their offices. The people who wrote this were risking their lives. They just put down the bare facts. For example, they would have an entry about shipping 20 bags of laundry out of the ghetto. It was really a euphemism for sending people out of the ghetto. How did she get the book? My mother gave it to me, but it was so big and thick that I put it in my thrift store pile. I'm really embarrassed to admit that. I didn't read it. My wife, who is 4'11" tall and English, she wanted me to clean up some of my books. I'm a book lover. So I put the book in the thrift store pile, and it opened. And I saw it was signed to my mother. My stepfather was also a Holocaust survivor. I began to read it, and I sat on the floor literally for 3 days reading it, this huge book. And as I was reading it, I said to myself, I finally understand what people went through during the Holocaust. Not in gas chambers, but in ghetto areas separated by barbed wire and rifle-toting sentries with orders to shoot anyone who got near the fence. I kept arguing with myself that I had to do something to share this with my grandchildren and children.
This book you inherited was written more like a ship's log as opposed to a novel.
It was just a series of unemotional, flat, boring entries, and I had to read them. As I read them, I realized what suspense people lived under, how their lives had been totally uprooted. It was as if they had a sword hanging over them that any day could separate their families and destroy them. What amazed me was that the leader of the ghetto was a man with a 5th grade education that the Germans picked for no known reason. He was trying to govern more than 200,000 human beings in this terrible place where conditions were so dire that people were fighting over potato skins. It was a terrible revelation to me. It wasn't like Anatevka and Fiddler on the Roof. It was a holding tank created by the Nazis as the first impersonal means to kill Jews, to kill my family. It was where I lost most of my relatives. I didn't know my mother had 6 brothers and sisters, and that my grandparents on both sides and my relatives did not survive. As I was sitting there reading this, I kept thinking about one of my favorite movies, 12 Angry Men, the original one, with Henry Fonda, where you have 12 men locked in a room together, and so much of their personalities are revealed in this claustrophobic environment. And as the idea circled in my head, I said, if I was really a good writer, and not just a children's writer, I would be writing this book down, the right name.
So how did you turn the chronicle into a love story?
It was very difficult. What happened? The first thing I did was I created a plan. And usually I'm what they call a flying by the seat of your pants writer. And there have been times where I'll get to the end of the story or the middle of the story. I'll say, I can't finish this. It doesn't work. Very frustrating. This time I planned it. I created the characters. What I decided to do was recreate as closely as possible the day-by-day events that happened in the ghetto and what the controversial leader of the ghetto did in his effort to save more than 200,000 people. Then I sat down at the computer, and a very strange thing happened. I typed 700 pages in about 30 days. I was absolutely exhausted. I was emotionally drained. And then I was almost embarrassed because I had never written anything like this before. I'd written short stories that had won awards. I'd written children's books that had won awards. But to write something like this, I didn't think I could do it. So I asked a friend of mine who was a retired professor of literature, who happened to be a staunch Catholic, because I didn't want a yes person. I wanted an honest appraisal of the book. I gave it to him, and I asked him, do me a favor, could you read this for me? And he called me 3 days later, and he said, Mark, this is an amazing accomplishment. You've got to publish this. And I wasn't convinced. So I gave it to other people to read, which is what I always advise other writers to do. Yeah. And I read it to a wonderful writing group in the Villages. Their response was almost always the same. They all said, Mark, this is a love story. We couldn't put it down. It was so suspenseful that we had to finish it.
Let's take a quick break and get an Alzheimer's tip.
This is Mike Roth and Dr. Craig Curtis speaking about Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
Dr. Curtis, can you talk about alcohol use and Alzheimer's?
Yes, Mike. They have had studies out for years that show those that have 1 to 2 drinks a day actually have a lower risk of heart attack or stroke. And in a study published,
That's interesting. That means that people who totally abstain from alcohol have a higher risk?
that's a difficult question, Mike. It's yes, those that abstain from alcohol, not with Alzheimer's disease, but actually had a slightly higher risk of heart attack and stroke. However, so this was a study published in June of 2023 in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology in stress signaling in the brain. So essentially, they had less stress, which we've always known is a risk factor for a heart attack or stroke. But the American College of Cardiology currently is not advocating for the use of alcohol to reduce your risk of heart attack or strokes because of other concerning effects of alcohol on health.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the Villages community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
Okay. So you finish the book, and why don't you tell our listeners what you've done to get the book published and perhaps produced into a TV series or a movie?
Getting a book published can be quite an experience. I have had 2 agents, and both turned out to be disasters. One involving a legal lawsuit to extricate myself from a contract. My choice was to self-publish or go through the rigmarole of getting another agent and going to a major publisher. I decided to self-publish this book. One of the reasons was I wasn't that confident in the book. There was another reason. My son had taken over my publishing company, done an amazing job. He has helped hundreds of villagers get their books published, and now specializing in helping authors all over the country market their books.
What is your son's publishing company's name?
Newhouse Creative Group.
And is there a website and phone number that people can...
There is. You can go to Newhouse Creative Group, Author Services. He treats everybody like family. In fact, he called them family members. And he has helped so many people. And I'm very proud of him.
How many books does he help publish?
Oh, I'd say several hundred at this point. Okay. And what he's done is he's really made my book successful. One of the things I've done with the books is because I've had so little confidence, I entered them in contests because I wanted the validation. And I have a funny story because the first year I entered the Florida Writers Association competitions, everybody said, oh, Mark, you're going to win. I did not. One of the judges wrote that the book sang in the middle. I always believed in taking criticism and working with it rather than getting upset or angry. So I read the book again. I said, that judge is right. It does sag in the middle. I cut the book in half, added a tail chapter and a new chapter to book 2. Then I entered the same contest with book 1. And I was shocked that it won the gold medal in historical fiction. And then I was called up as one of the finalists for the top honor, which is Book of the Year.
So if our listeners want to read a copy of the book, how is it available today?
It's available on Amazon. It's available on Kindle. And it's also available as an amazing audio book.
I listened to it as an audible book, and it is just phenomenal. You couldn't stop listening to it.
Would you agree with me? That's an amazing love story.
It's an amazing love story. I really felt that the actor read the book, all 3 volumes of the book, just did a phenomenal job and made a book that I felt was hard to read, easy to listen to. And that was a tremendous difference of context that the actor provided and made it a really phenomenal listen.
When I heard him audition, I just knew that he was right.
The actor did a great job. Mark, about how many copies of the book have sold?
That's a great question. We've had over 2,000 reviews, which for an independently published book is incredible. And when I read them, I get very emotional. I would say at least 10,000 copies of the Kindle edition. And I don't know exactly how many hard copies, but I will tell you the fact that if anyone reads the book and learns a true story and is emotionally moved by it, that to me makes it all worthwhile. And with the audiobook, the reason I did that, because I knew it was going to be expensive propositions, was I had been doing a presentation for a group, and I had about 200 people there. One person came up to me and said, Mark, a lot of the people who survived the Holocaust and the soldiers who went into the concentration camps, they can't read anymore. And I said, you're right. And that's why I decided to do the audiobook. I never thought that I myself would be so moved by hearing this wonderful actor pronouncing my words. It wasn't easy because he had to capture the Polish accents and the female voices and the many voices in the book.
That's why you use a professional actor or reader to get the characters right in the book so that the listener can identify.
I could capture the emotions and the suspense, but to actually do a professional job was beyond my ability, and I knew it. Yes, I'm very proud of it.
The book is available on Audible, Amazon,
wherever you can get
audio books. Good. Yeah. And the name of the book is
The Devil's Bookkeepers. 3 volumes. A lot of people say it's very difficult to read a book about the Holocaust, but it's a love story that transcends the Holocaust.
It's a love story with a background of the Holocaust.
And I also feel it's not just about the Holocaust, but it's about humanity today and what we're facing in the world today. The suspense just keeps people reading. The other important thing I think that people should know is it's not about the gas chambers. It is not about the horrors. It's about people like you and me forming friendships, finding love, and trying to survive. It's a key word.
Survive and trust other people.
Survive and find hope. Find hope even in the most dire conditions, which we see emulated all over the world today.
Thanks for being on the podcast with me today for one of your other projects.
I'll be honored to be here anytime, Mike. Thank you so much.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout-out for supporters: Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, Duane Romick, Paul Sorgen, Kathy Loving, and Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. The way our show grows is with your help. Text your friends about this show if you enjoyed listening, or just tell your friends about the show. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2024. All rights reserved.